got 200 points. I got 50 points. I got 50 more points. Oh, hello there. And welcome to another episode of Hamilton Reads. I was just playing a game with my friend Marvin. Marvin, come here, buddy. Come here. Come here. It's my turn to wear that silly little thing. Come here, buddy. You deserve a treat for that one. I was just playing a game with Marvin called Headbutt. It's a silly little game in which you use 3 balls, like these, and you use something that looks kind of like a swim cap, like this, and you have one person put on the swim cap, and it has Velcro on it all around with different points, and then you have somebody throw the balls at you. So you just have somebody that is going to go ahead and throw the balls at you, and then you try to get some points. Look at all the points I'm getting. I'm getting so many points. I got more points. Look, let's see. I got 50 points, and this one is 200 points, and I think this one here is another 50 points, which is kind of cool. So 200 plus 50 plus 50, that's a total of 300 points. That's a lot of points. So that's basically how you play this game called Headbutt. So I'll just throw those over there, and I'll let Marvin go play a little bit. I'll take that off for now, and I'll sit up in my chair, and we'll get to chapter 19 and chapter 20 of Hamilton Reads with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I'm sorry, chapter 19 and 20 of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Here I go, up in my chair. So, chapter 19. Chapter 19 is called The Inventing Room, Everlasting Gobstoppers and Hair Toffee. When Mr. Wonka shouted, "Stop the boat!" the Oompa Loompas jammed their oars into the river and backed water furiously. The boat stopped. The Oompa Loompas guided the boat alongside the red door. On the door it said, "Inventing Room, Private, Keep Out." Mr. Wonka took a key from his pocket, leaned out over the side of the boat, and put the key in the keyhole. "This is the most important room in the entire factory," he said. "All my most secret new inventions are cooking and simmering in here. Old Ficklegruber would give his front teeth to be allowed inside just for 3 minutes. So would Prodnose and Slugsworth and all the other rotten chocolate makers. But now listen to me. I want no messing about when you go in. No touching, no meddling, no tasting. Is that agreed?" Yes, the children cried. "We won't touch a thing." "Well, up to now," Mr. Wonka said, "nobody else, not even an Oompa Loompa, has ever been allowed in here." He opened the door and stepped out of the boat into the room. The 4 children and their parents all scrambled after him. "Don't touch!" shouted Mr. Wonka, "and don't knock anything over." Charlie Bucket stared around the gigantic room in which he now found himself. The place was like a witch's kitchen. All about him, black metal pots were boiling and bubbling on huge stoves, and kettles were hissing, and pans were sizzling, and strange iron machines were clanking and spluttering, and there were pipes running all over the ceiling and walls, and the whole place was filled with smoke and steam and delicious, rich smells. Mr. Wonka himself had suddenly become even more excited than usual, and anyone could see that this was the room he loved best of all. He was hopping about among the saucepans and the machines like a child among his Christmas presents, not knowing which thing to look at first. He lifted the lid from a huge pot and took a sniff. Then he rushed over and dipped a finger into a barrel of sticky yellow stuff and had a taste. Then he skipped across to one of the machines and turned half a dozen knobs this way and that. Then he peered anxiously through the glass door of a gigantic oven, rubbing his hands and cackling with delight at what he saw inside. Then he ran over to another machine, a small shiny affair that kept going, and every time it went, a large green marble dropped out of it into a basket on the floor. At least it looked like a marble. Everlasting gobstoppers, cried Mr. Wonka proudly. They're completely new. I'm inventing them for children who are given very little pocket money. You can put an everlasting gobstopper in your mouth and you can suck it and suck it and suck it and suck it and it will never get any smaller. It's like gum, cried Violet Beauregard. It is not like gum, Mr. Wonka said. Gum is for chewing, and if you tried chewing one of these gobstoppers here, you'd break your teeth off. And they never get any smaller. They never disappear. Never! At least I don't think they do. There's one of them being tested this very moment in the testing room next door. An Oompa Loompa is sucking it. He's been sucking it for very nearly a year now without stopping, and it's still just as good as ever. Now over here, Mr. Wonka went on, skipping excitedly across the room to the opposite wall. Over here I am inventing a completely new line in toppings. He stopped beside a large saucepan. The saucepan was full of thick, gooey, purplish treacle. Treacle? Treacle? Purplish treacle? 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 Boiling and bubbling. By standing on his toes, little Charlie could just see inside it. That's hair toffee, cried Mr. Wonka. You eat just one tiny bit of that, and in exactly a half an hour, a brand new, luscious, thick, silky, beautiful crop of hair will start growing out all over the top of your head. And a mustache, and a beard. Well, a beard? Cried Veruca Salt. Who wants a beard, for heaven's sake? Well, it wouldn't suit you very well, said Mr. Wonka. But unfortunately, the mixture is not quite right yet. I've got it too strong. It works too well. I tried it on an Oompa Loompa yesterday in the testing room, and immediately a huge black beard started shooting out of his chin, and the beard grew so fast that soon it was trailing all over the floor in a thick, hairy carpet. It was growing faster than we could cut it. In the end, we had to use a lawnmower to keep it in check. But I'll get the mixture right soon, and when I do, then there will be no excuse anymore for little boys and girls going about with bald heads. Oh, but Mr. Wonka, said Mike Teavee, little boys and girls do go about with... Wait a second. Mr. Wonka, said Mike Teavee, little boys and girls never do go about with... Don't argue, my dear child. Please don't argue, cried Mr. Wonka. It's such a waste of precious time. Now over here, if you will all step this way, I will show you something that I am terrifically proud of. Oh, do be careful. Don't knock anything over. Stand back. The next chapter is chapter 20, which is called The Great Gum Machine. Mr. Wonka led the party over to a gigantic machine that stood in the very center of the inventing room. It was a mountain of gleaming metal that towered high above the children and their parents. Out of the very top of it, there sprouted hundreds and hundreds of thin glass tubes, and the glass tubes all curled downwards and came together in a bunch and hung suspended over an enormous round tub as big as a bat. Here we go, cried Mr. Wonka, and he pressed 3 different buttons on the side of the machine. A second later, a mighty rumbling sound came from inside it, and the whole machine began to shake most frighteningly, and steam began hissing out of it all over, and then suddenly the watchers noticed that runny stuff was pouring down the insides of all the hundreds of little glass tubes and squirting out into the great tub below. And in every single tube, the runny stuff was of a different color, so that all the colors of the rainbow, and many others as well, came sloshing and splashing into the tub. It was a lovely sight. And then the tub was nearly full. Mr. Wonka pressed another button, and immediately the runny stuff disappeared, and a whizzing, whirring noise took place. And then a giant whizzer started whizzing around inside the enormous tub, mixing up all the different colored liquids, like an ice cream soda. Gradually, the mixture began to froth. It became frothier and frothier, and it turned from blue to green, to brown to yellow, then back to blue again. Watch, cried Mr. Wonka. Click went the machine, and the whizzer stopped whizzing, and now there came a sort of sucking noise, and very quickly all the blue frothy mixture in the huge basin was sucked back into the stomach of the machine. There was a moment of silence, then a few queer rumblings were heard, then silence again, Then suddenly the machine let out a monstrous, mighty groan, and at the same moment, a tiny drawer, no bigger than the drawer in a slot machine, popped out of the side of the machine, and in the drawer there lay something so small and thin and gray that everyone thought it must be a mistake. The thing looked like a little strip of gray cardboard. The children and their parents stared at the little gray strip lying in the drawer. "You mean that's all?" said Mike TV, disgusted. "That's all," answered Mr. Wonka, gazing proudly at the result. "Don't you know what it is?" There was a pause. Then suddenly Violet Beauregard, the silly gum-chewing girl, let out a yell of excitement. "By gum, it's gum!" she shrieked. "It's a stick of chewing gum!" "All right you are," cried Mr. Wonka, slapping Violet hard on the back. "It's a stick of gum. It's a stick of the most amazing and fabulous and sensational gum in the whole world." That's the end of chapter 20. That's where we're going to stop today. That's where we're going to pick up tomorrow on our Friday. Today, of course, is Thursday, April 16th. Tomorrow is Friday, April 17th. I always have to do the math in my head because, to be quite honest, I'm losing track of days. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and set my book down over here. And now we'll get to my sock segment, I believe, because I have not done my sock segment yet. Excuse me, Mr. Producer, have I done my sock segment yet?
No.
I didn't hear you. What?
No.
I didn't do my sock segment yet, so it's time for my sock segment. My producer said it's time. So today, oh my gosh! Today I've got on some SpongeBob socks. I know I've worn SpongeBob socks before, but these ones have lots of SpongeBob faces on them. If you can see, Marvin's being a little hog of the camera. Anyway, I got SpongeBob socks on. Those are special. It's cool. It's a mess over here in this house tonight. It's a little crazy, mind you. Sorry, Marvin's wound up. He loves the game Headbutt. He wants to play more. He loves putting that swim cap on his head, believe it or not. Anyway, we're going to get to our shout-out. So, our shout-out today, number one, I want to give a shout-out to the inventor of the loofah. My sister, number one, not the inventor of the loofah, my sister Madeline watched an episode yesterday. She saw that I was looking for the inventor of the loofah. She gave it to me. The inventor of the loofah, drum roll please, is a guy named Judson Snyder. Interesting name, Judson Snyder, inventor of the loofah. Shout out to you, Judson Snyder. Shout out to the inventor of the Headbutt game. I don't know if his name is Peter Headbutt, or maybe it's Samantha Headbutt, or I don't know. Or maybe it's Headbutt Hamilton, or maybe it's Marvin Headbutt. Anyway, shout out to that guy. And shout out to my Uncle Jeff George, who went fishing with me today. Shout out to him. We caught some trout while we went fishing today, which was quite fun. And also, I would like to give a shout out to my producer, whose name is Umar Satkins. So, with that being said, thank you for stopping by for another episode of Hamilton Reads, and stay tuned tomorrow for another episode in which we will read chapter 21 of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.